Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fashion Activism, Rethinking What We Wear and What It Means. This is the third and final in the series called Changing Fashion and Fashioning Change. I'm Allison Trope. A lot of you are my students, so hi, everybody who's here for class. I'm a professor in the School of Communication. And I want to begin this evening by thanking Gabriella and Austin Hurst for generously supporting this series, as well as the event we did last spring called Fashion and Social Media. As the last of this series, looking at change in the fashion industry, I think it's appropriate that we're ending with a focus on activism and looking toward the future. Where fashion may take us politically and culturally, and how activists may use fashion to call for change. So far, this series has looked at how the fashion industry has changed or needs to change with regard to racial inclusion and issues of sustainability. Tonight, we're discussing ways fashion can potentially be seen and used as a vehicle for social and political change. And I'm going to offer a really loose and quick historical frame for our discussion tonight, taking into account styles of disenfranchised groups that have been used to signal resistance, from the zoot suits of the 1940s to various post-war youth subcultures, to more recently, the pussy hats from the Women's March last January. We also can consider the roots of protest and statement t-shirts in 1960s counterculture, making their way into design circles in the 70s and 80s with Vivienne Westwood and Catherine Hamnett. And finally, I'd like to think about the way popular media and journalism have played a role in telling stories about fashion activism. From the July cover of Allure, featuring tonight's panelist, Halima Aden, on its American Beauty issue, to this week's cover of GQ featuring Colin Kaepernick as Citizen of the Year. So tonight we have a range of guests who will help us understand different facets of fashion activism in this contemporary moment. We'll think about whether fashion can embody, represent, and ignite social and political change, whether the very idea of a protest t-shirt or pussy hat diminishes and dilutes concrete political action, and whether we can apply the ideals of free speech and freedom of religion to dress. So the way this is going to work tonight, I want to introduce our first panelist, who is going to set the stage for the discussion. And we will have each panelist come up and give about a 10-minute talk, and then we're going to convene all of us for Q&A and a moderated panel. So first, we're going to hear from Sarah Banet-Weiser, who is Vice Dean of the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, as well as Director and Professor in the School of Communication. She teaches courses in culture and communication, gender and media, youth culture, feminist theory, and cultural studies, and is the author of Authentic, The Politics of Ambivalence in a Brand Culture, and co-editor of the volume Commodity Activism, Cultural Resistance in Neoliberal Times. Sarah?
I'll just start with that one, leave it up for a little while. Hi, everyone. Sorry, mic issues. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Allison, for inviting me to be up here on stage with three incredibly talented, beautiful young women who actually work and create in the fashion industry, and unlike me, who just kind of writes about it and figures out what to wear each day. So I'm very humbled to be here with the rest of the panelists, and I'm just gonna talk a little bit about thinking about fashion as social activism, and I'm going to be kind of positioning myself as the sort of pessimist on this panel to think about what are some of the limitations of things like feminist t-shirts and different kind of activist t-shirts, and how we can think through those limitations and actually realize something that is more productive and about possibility, which the three panelists are going to talk to you about. So to start off with, as Allison said, I just want to kind of set the stage for thinking about what it means to think of fashion as activism. It's clear, you all know this, it's clear that buying things, participating in consumer culture, is one of the key ways in which social change or social action or possibility for social change is made visible. Whether it's buying a t-shirt that has a pink ribbon on it to fight breast cancer, or participating in, buying certain kinds of products and not others for things like anything from feminism to fair trade, to environmentalism, to thinking about crises and refugees, that these are things that we participate in as consumers. So it's now become the kind of the place where it's entirely unsurprising to participate in social activism by buying something. And what I want to talk about or ask us to think about is the range of that participation. There are often contradictions that are inherent in connecting philanthropy and social action onto merchandising practices, onto consumer behavior, onto market incentives and corporate profits. So I want us to think through for the next couple of minutes some of those contradictions and give a sense of the range within what I have called, as Allison said, commodity activism, which is, again, participating in activism through commodity culture. And especially think about it in the current moment. This is a moment when realms of culture and society that were once considered outside the official economy have been sort of harnessed and reshaped and made legible in economic and consumer terms. So again, I want to think what that means in terms of both its possibilities and limitations. So I think we've witnessed a powerful turn in the modes and meanings of social activism in the past several decades, where our style politics are increasingly understood as social politics. And we can even say that social action itself has become a commodity. So it's not just the politics, but it's social action that is something that we can buy and purchase and relate to as a commodity. And it's characteristic of the commodity form. Social action is produced through labor. It's often produced for purposes of trade and profit within markets. And it's often sort of fetishized in culture as something that means something that we all immediately know. So commodity activism, as we encounter it today, offers us to think through some of the promises and the perils of this kind of resistance as it takes place in the current moment. Fashion is an incredibly rich site to explore some of these issues, to look at the kind of current struggles about what social activism means, who gets to take shape as activists, which you will see with the next three panelists, who gets to take shape, who gets to make a difference in terms of thinking about fashion and style politics as politics, and whom such activism is imagined to serve. So those are the kinds of things. Who are we serving when we use fashion as politics? And again, I'm going to offer a bit of a more cynical take on these struggles to talk about kind of more about what happens when commodity activism becomes something that looks a little bit like cultural appropriation. And that is always the slippery slope. It is always the danger of thinking about politics when you wear them on your body, when you embody them, and make them part of that. So, this is just one part of thinking about commodity activism. I want to focus on feminism as fashion for the rest of my few minutes. I keep in time for me. Okay. I've been working for several years on thinking about what I call popular feminism, where it seems that in this current moment, pretty much everyone is talking about feminism. You know, we have people who have marked it when Beyonce played at the VMAs in 2014 with the word feminist lit up behind her. We have people who have said, you know, and in the feminist blog Jezebel, what does it mean for feminism if feminism becomes trendy? We have Super Bowl commercials that are dedicated to feminist issues. We have confidence organizations and ad campaigns teaching girls to be confident. Popular feminism has become trendy. And like other manifestations of trendiness, including fashion, it means that it's also become fashion. And it's not that feminism and fashion have never merged. In the 70s, feminists wore t-shirts that expressed a political message. So here you have women, part of the kind of 1970s feminist movement in the United States, wearing shirts that say Lavender Menace, which was an early incarnation of thinking about LGBT rights. You have another one about voting for the ERA that says we haven't come a long way and we're not, and you're not a baby. Sorry, I was gonna say when we're not babies. These were important expressions of politics, but they weren't necessarily sponsored and produced and distributed in a kind of popular way as mass production, right? Now, you have feminism being taken up not only by trendy fast fashion or trendy design, designers, which I'll get to in a minute, but you have high fashion, haute couture taking up fashion. This, some of you may have seen this, is a 2014 Chanel show in Paris, where they recreated the whole runway as a Paris street scene, and had as the final walk down on the runway, the models wearing Chanel outfits, but also you know, participating in a feminist protest. So this was a way that Chanel appropriated this notion of feminism and incorporated it into the show. And I'm gonna ask you to think about what you think that means, and whether or not you think this is a good, you know, this is something positive, or this is something that we should be kind of critical of. Dior had their first female designer this year, who produced this t-shirt, "We Should All Be Feminists." I think it's a great t-shirt. I actually think we should all be feminists. So I think that there's a lot to be said there. I think that when you charge $710 for a white t-shirt that says we should all be feminists, that you're actually not talking about an all there, right? You're talking about a very particular group who should be feminists, who can afford a $700 t-shirt. This part of popular feminism has not just gone into high culture, though, but is translated into, oh, there's one more. This is a quote, real Antifa jacket that is being sold at Barney's right now. I'm not really sure what it means by real. Like, did someone donate this jacket, like, after they've worn it for a long time? Or is this a jacket that is created with the real symbols of Antifa? Again, an anti-fascist movement whose members probably would not advocate for a jacket to cost $375 that you can get at Barney's, right? So these are the kinds of contradictions that I think are important for us to look through. We also have trendy fashion, right? So we have Rebecca Minkoff, who has a sweatshirt that says feminist. We have Free People with a feminist t-shirt. I don't know if any of you have been to H&M lately, but H&M is filled with feminist t-shirts and t-shirts that say empowered and, you know, girl power and girls club and that kind of thing. We also have Etsy, right, where you have a lot of kind of jewelry and other kind of ironic misandry products made in the kind of name of feminism. And again, the problem with this feminist fashion is not that the messages aren't important. You know, having H&M or Free People create t-shirts that say feminist and that are not seen as a threat, that are seen as something that is affirmative and important, that is really great in terms of making it popular, spreading the message. I have a 16-year-old daughter. You know, she's really tired of me buying her feminist t-shirts, right? But I can buy her so many because they're so available, right? And I can get them anywhere. And for her, you know, or for any young women for whom Feminism has been seen as a threat, has been seen as something that you would shy away from, right? The idea that you can, feminist t-shirts and the message of feminism has spread has been really, really important. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The problem for me, and again, this is just one side of it, is that often when politics are expressed on the body through fashion, those politics frequently end up staying on the body. They remain at an individual level. So wearing a shirt that says this is what a feminist looks like focuses the attention back on what we look like, back on looks on the body, rather than systemic politics. So it focuses on individuals rather than on patriarchy, and you know, which has been historically the kind of issue for feminism. And this can be dangerous for resistance and activism. When resistance becomes commodified, something that we wear rather than practice, that thing that we wear then becomes the end in and of itself. It becomes the politics. So the t-shirt becomes the politics. And what I think we should be fighting for in terms of fashion and activism is how to make that next step of wearing the t-shirt and then, you know, having it represent a sort of political practice rather than a simple, a style choice, rather than a fashion choice. So these are the questions that I'm interested in. What does it mean to do activism in this context that is increasingly defined by not just consumer culture and capitalism, but individuals rather than collectives. Individuals who are, you know, kind of focus the politics back on their body. So how do we think through some of these practices that shape contemporary conceptions of citizenship and community, of marginality and resistance? What account can we make of political consequences of civic engagement and social action and social change that is increasingly defined by the logics of the marketplace? And again, I think I'm gonna end with a shot of the pink pussy hat and the way in which it created an amazing visual for the Women's March of 2017. Where thousands and thousands of women wearing this kind of hat, right, were seen as this incredible symbol of female power. And it was, if you saw this or if you marched and felt that power, it was incredible. But again, it is something that for all its power, what has happened since then? In terms of state politics and federal politics in the US is that women have been silenced, women have been shut down, reproductive rights have been taken away. So let's think about what it means to not stop with this incredible visual of the pink pussy hat, right? There, you know, one of my favorite photos that was circulated on social media after this was a woman, an LGBT activist, African-American activist named Angela Peoples, who stood in front of 3 white women wearing the pink pussy hats who were taking selfies and texting with a hat that said, "Stop killing black people," right? And a sign that said 53% of white women voted for Trump. Those are the kinds of contradictions and tensions that I think we need to, you know, really reveal and think through when we're talking about fashion as activism. It doesn't mean we shouldn't wear the pink pussy hat, but it does mean that we should take a step further and think a little bit more about what that means in terms of practice and not just a style choice. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Next up, we're going to hear from Celine Semaan, who is CEO, creative director of Slow Factory and the Library's Sustainable Fashion Archive. With a background in user experience design, information architecture, and multimedia art, she has pioneered new materials and is invested in using fashion as a medium for social change.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so hard to follow Sarah's talk, but I will do my best. Oops, wrong button. Okay. So I started Slow Factory 5 years ago, before activism had reached that point of suddenly it had become very fashionable. In fact, I was on a panel before the new administration, and someone raised their hand in the audience and asked me, but being an activist is not good. Being activist means being a troublemaker. And I remember sitting there and thinking, we should redesign the concept of being an activist so we can empower people not to feel like they're troublemakers, rather feel empowered that their voice matters. Fast forward a few days after the administration, we were on a panel and everyone was an activist. So that's me. I'm born in Lebanon during the war, and I'm showing this because my sister just recently found it. My entire family lives in Lebanon, and we escaped during the war on a refugee status. This was taken just minutes before we had to escape from that house, and as it was being bombed. And I just show it, I love showing it because it's joy as a form of resistance, joy as a form of activism. And we were here, we're partying, everything's cool, and then later on we have to go and we just rebuild our lives. So resilience. I just wanted to just give you an idea of where I come from. The culture of resistance through joy, through beauty. I really think these two notions are very important in bringing people into action, bringing people into empathy. So that's the refugee photo status that was taken that allowed us to escape Lebanon and go to Montreal. And everyone that sees this ask me, is this your Christmas card? And I'm like, nope. It's our refugee photo, but we all look really good because dignity and beauty is a form of identity. And so I play a lot around these notions of dignity and beauty as we are working around activism. A few years ago, I started working with Syrian refugees in Lebanon. There's 1.8 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon today. And we developed an education program with the NGO that we work with. And, you know, we had a lot of things, math and English and technology and whatnot. But the one education program that was the most popular was a beauty program, teaching kids how to put makeup on and makeup artists and fashion design. So I went back to Lebanon because I go there a lot. My whole family lives there. I'm the only one who's still an expat. And we did a photo shoot with the girls in the refugee camps with the Slow Factory scarves that we make. Now, if you're not familiar with Slow Factory, we print NASA satellite images on sustainable silk, and we raise awareness about things that normally just stay hidden in NGO world or in a donation kind of world that's very close. So we really tell stories using NASA images. Here she's wearing a New York by Night scarf, and she's telling me that she wants to travel to New York, yet she's trapped in Lebanon. And we're taking these photos, and I'm taking them, and I'm not a photographer. And she's pausing, and they're all pausing, and they're having so much fun. And through beauty, through fashion, they're telling me that for them, it is a coping mechanism. Their dreams are to continue their passions into fashion. And I asked them, why fashion, why beauty? And they say, you know, when I put makeup on, when I put mascara on, and I go to see my friend, I feel so much better about myself. I feel strong, I feel good. And I really thought, wow, this is so universal. Everyone can relate with this. But no one talks about this in the media. We portray these girls as, you know, with I call it like donation porn, you know, like they are deprived of their dignity, they are deprived of their beauty, they're seen as animals and no one relates to them. And so that's where I work. I work on the opposite end of this. A few years later, no, not a few years, maybe a few months ago, or yes, a few years later, a few months ago, I started working for ACLU. And again, I started working with them based on my own passion. So I did products and I knocked on their doors and I was like, hey, what if we had a US flight jacket with the First Amendment written in Arabic on the back and the First Amendment written in Arabic on the inside, and the flight jacket is made in the same facility that makes the US flight jacket, which happens to be in China. Think about it. And they're like, what? No. So I did it. And this jacket now is in SF MoMA. I'm very proud of this artifact. I approached this design as artifacts, as archaeological artifacts that later on we would look at them and we will understand what happened in society. This was designed and implemented and produced shortly after the ban. This model is wearing a We the People necklace that has been going viral recently since Zendaya and Selena Gomez wore it. We the People, simple message, first sentence of the Constitution. Very simple symbol, very powerful in a very peaceful way. She's wearing a band scarf. I don't know if I have it here, but the band scarf that she's wearing is an image of NASA taken of the Earth at night, showing the 7 banned countries, so basically Middle East, North Africa, at night. Beautiful picture, super peaceful, and I wrote the words ban on it and crossed it out. So what we do product, meaning, and impact. And I think that the way that activism doesn't work everywhere in the corporate world is because they forget about meaning and impact. They just go for it for marketing purposes. Fashion and purpose together can create social change. It is a powerful image. I agree with Sarah that said it is a powerful image. How can we get it out of just being a beautiful image and bringing people into action? And that is what we focus on. So again, the US flight jacket, for example, donates a percentage of the sales back to the ACLU. The message on its own is a very powerful message. People wearing it, it becomes a conversation piece. They're like, hey, look at the inside of my jacket. Look at inside of my pocket. It's written where it's made. And that is the kind of conversation we want to carry from a person to another. So that's the English on the inside. Again, just to focus on the We the People necklace. Oh, so that's the band scarf. I knew I had it somewhere. Again, when we first started Slow Factory, it was very political without having any cause attached to it, because we were archiving NASA images on silk. We were archiving images of the world that wasn't really being seen. I remember the first image that really got the attention of the media was Gaza by night. And it was taken during the war with Gaza, and it was at a moment. It was at night, and there was a moment where there wasn't any electricity going on, like Gaza was shut down, and all we could see was the explosion from space. Even the astronaut who took that picture tweeted, "That's the saddest picture I've taken from space," because we could see the explosion. I immediately downloaded it and printed it. We were already archiving these images on an ethically sourced silk with a zero-waste water printer. In Italy, I've researched years to find the right people to work with. I wanted to work on materializing the immaterial to create awareness, to create a new narrative, but I didn't want to do it on polyester. I didn't want to do it on a material that hurts the planet, and in a way that hurts the people too, because of the of how it's manufactured. So we work with fair trade factories. So we've gained a lot of traction. And we were able to raise a lot of funds to support both the refugee crisis and the new initiatives that we've undertaken with the ACLU, with the World Wildlife Fund, working on the intersection between human rights and the refugee crisis. People were like, "Can you pick one?" And I'm like, "No, it's connected." So here are some of our partners. And again, impact and meaning goes through, makes sense through transparency. We're transparent about where we manufacture, how we manufacture, what is the fiber that we use, all the way to where is this money going. We recently switched the company from a C Corp to a B Corp. I don't know if you're familiar, but to go through that process, you need to show a lot of proof that what you are doing is actually for the benefit of others. So this is an image of a woman that we've, through ANERA, the American Near East Refugee Aid, one of our partner NGO, we were able to raise $10,000 and to rebuild a school in Gaza where this woman is the principal, the teacher, and the owner of the school, and she runs it by herself. We also did something outside of the NASA images. We remolded the key of my house in Lebanon with my sister and through Armenian refugees that work in Lebanon. Armenian refugees in Lebanon, they're like third generation and they still don't have papers, just because the way that the Lebanese government was set after the war is not able to give papers to refugees, so we really wanted to work with them and empower them. And the idea of wearing a key around your neck is a symbol of displacement. It started with the Palestinians in the 40s. When they came to Lebanon, they were wearing their keys around their necks. When I got back to Lebanon, so I mentioned I lived in Montreal for 10 years, from 4 till 14. And at 14, the war in Lebanon kind of officially ended and my parents wanted to go back. So we all went back. And I saw a lot of people with their keys around their necks. So I wanted to wear my home key of Montreal around my neck. And my mom was like, no, you don't get to wear that, I'm sorry. So it really stayed with me as a powerful symbol. And I wanted to redo it. Going back to the materials we're using, our new partner is Thread International. Thread International collects bottles out of landfills in Haiti and turns them into denim, turns them into fabric. It replaces the polyester that you have in your fabric. And it's a wonderful project. It's also a B Corp. It's half NGO, half product. It's wonderful. We're so thrilled to be partnering with them in launching their denim line. And so I started a new company for the denim line. It's called The Library, and it's a sustainable fashion archive. And what we want to do with it is we want to archive and revive classics, iconic pieces in the fashion industry, because timeless pieces are what's sustainable. And it's kind of against the trends, and it's really supported with data, with research, that if we were able to look at all the pieces that were made throughout history. So for example, here we have a jumpsuit. Its pattern is made out of the 1940s first jumpsuit. Of course, we've changed a little bit of it, we've adapted it, but essentially it is the same. And these are the first hot pants, 1930s. It's the pattern, I bought it on eBay. And, and then we like readapted and we shifted for the body of the today's women. But these were hot pants. They were not hot at all, but they're super cute. So this is our mood board, our inspiration. This is what we look for, timeless pieces that have changed the course of history, that we want to revive using sustainable material. As for us, this is the new luxury. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Celine. Next up, Angela Luna, founder and CEO of ADIFF. Guided by a mission rooted in social entrepreneurship and solution brand design, ADIFF produces and sells convertible and multifunctional jackets within the outerwear market and is committed to creating products and services to better the world and make a difference in global displacement and local displacement, which maybe you'll talk about. Okay.
Hi guys, I'm such a millennial. I have my notes on my iPad. But yeah, so what I really want to start off today with talking about is the potential for fashion to save lives, which I know sounds ridiculous, but promise me we'll get there. And then kind of tying that in again with this idea of fashion activism and using mass-produced fashion as a way to kind of create awareness, but even going beyond that with what we are doing as a company and what we can do with our actions. So let's talk a little bit about intentional design. We know it exists in the world. It doesn't really happen as much in our consumer clothing, but we see it in like firefighter and army uniforms, construction attire, even astronaut suits are considered as articles of clothing. And that's something that if anything is messed up, it becomes life-threatening. Yet this kind of idea of intentional design, having something be designed for a purpose, doesn't necessarily apply into our mass production consumer markets. And so it really kind of just ends there at these high-risk jobs, police uniforms, Kevlar vests, et cetera. And there are some new brands that are really interested in how we interact with our clothing, but specifically with humanitarian application for intentionally designed clothing is non-existent. We see refugees fleeing in branded t-shirts and jeans, which of course makes sense because if we all had to get up and leave right now, we'd be stuck in whatever clothes we were wearing. And, but even the donated clothes are just more of the same, just trend-focused clothing that other people don't want hanging up in their closets anymore. And unfortunately, when it does come to disaster relief, stylish but ultimately useless clothes are the vast majority of items that are donated. And while there always seems to be a steady stream of donations, they're not meeting the need and can often cause a myriad of other issues within crisis. For example, like noisy or vibrant clothing bringing attention to people who are trying to flee undetected, dark or unrecognizable clothing creating danger when traveling on unlit roads, water-absorbing clothing that adds weight or discomfort, clothing that's not responsive to climate, resulting in illness. Not to mention just the overall ease and functionality of the garments. For example, if you're traveling with a lot, you'd like to have several pockets to put things in so that way you can distribute the weight. Or if it rains, you want your clothes to be able to dry quickly, or better yet, to keep you dry while you're wearing them. So when I visited refugee camps in Greece, I watched as volunteers were passing out spring jackets for winter because that was all they had. There are children running around in adult-sized flip-flops in the cold of November who are occasionally taking them off so they can play jump rope without tripping. Also, mismatched shoes and bins at warehouses where there was surprisingly an inventory of Halloween costumes. Clothing is being given out in the wrong sizes, for the wrong seasons, for the wrong purposes, with visible wears and stains. So what's really needed is clothing that goes back to the original purpose of clothing, a sort of clothing for crisis, if you will, where form should follow function. Design should be user-centered and solution-based, made to solve problems, not create more. Clothing should be seasonless, able to adapt to any climate, and sizeless, able to fit almost every body type. And most importantly, clothing should not be related to the cause of death for anyone. It's funny how quickly we forget that clothing is one of the main things we need for survival in our expanded environments, and yet the fashion industry doesn't feel the compulsion to provide for those who still rely on it for survival. So then why don't we see fashion as a way to provide relief for global issues? So I am a solution-based fashion designer, which means that I understand the true value our clothing can provide. I founded the humanitarian outerwear startup ADIFF, which uses intentional design to assist refugees and homeless. We're all about using the fashion industry to create aid and awareness for global displacement. Now, this is inherently controversial because fashion, as we know it, doesn't deal in business or politics or global issues, right? No, of course not. Fashion as we know it is useless. When I say the word fashion, what comes to mind? For me, it's runways, models, luxury, red carpets, and Fifth Avenue. Something superficial, frivolous, unimportant, and expensive. Not to mention wasteful. After all, fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world, just behind oil. It's also the only industry that can tell you not to wear that perfectly good jacket that's hanging up in the back of your closet because it is out of fashion. Fashion has also widely been considered as detached from global concerns or maybe even above them. Most runway shows don't call our society or our practices into question. They don't offer proposals or solutions to combat the issues in our world. To echo Sarah's point earlier, that Chanel show, which attempted to bring awareness to feminism, was actually more about the commoditization of feminism and more based on gaining revenue on the back of activism and ending it at the appearance and not acting beyond that. It's not enough as fashion designers to call attention to something. You need to offer something to the dialogue and then back it up with action. But beyond that activism aspect, most runway shows deal with kind of abstract, ridiculous concepts like clouds or like walking down a city street in Paris or being first class at an airport, which is such bullshit. Sorry, guys. It's a waste of time, money, resources, space, all of it. It's merely a distraction of the real issues of the world, further highlighting the economic gaps between those who have money to afford the products and those who don't. So that was my rant on fashion. I'm not here to convince you guys that fashion isn't all of these things. It is. But it doesn't have to be. Obviously, this sense of the industry is not capable of saving lives, but it's not my focus. I believe that purposefully designed clothing can offer solutions and deliver aid, that fashion can create awareness and solidarity, and that it truly should be considered as an asset as we move forward. So that brings us back to that first question. Can fashion save lives? I think so, absolutely. So I bet you wouldn't guess, this jacket that I'm wearing right now actually turns into a tent. This jacket is one of 7 that I designed in reaction to the refugee crisis. The collection responds to the need for shelter, for sleep, relocation, need to be seen 1 second and hide the next, the need to travel safely on water, the risks of traveling with young children, and the overall need for warm, durable clothing. Using intentional design to reduce risk, I created a series of jackets that can transform into tents, a sleeping bag, or a backpack, as well as jackets equipped for carrying children, flotation, and invisibility. Everything is all gender, one size, weatherproof, and can be worn in numerous environments. So I launched this project originally with the sole intention of donating these products, but then I was surprised to learn that average people were interested in purchasing them and using them for outdoor recreation. It was then that I realized our potential to use the fashion industry to provide aid for this crisis. And so we transitioned from a project to a brand. We operate by selling our jackets within the outdoor fashion industry to consumers. And for every jacket purchased, we then donate one to refugees or homeless worldwide. Our mission is to really create a sustainable model for impact that allows us to consistently donate product without having to rely on government or nonprofit grants. And I feel like this is really the successful way to use fashion as activism. It starts with awareness, but it ends with impact. So we tested our jackets in refugee camps in Greece and received overwhelmingly positive feedback. They generated such excitement as little kids ran from tent to tent telling everyone to come out and try them on. At every camp, it became all the more obvious, though, just how needed these products were and how much they would facilitate the daily lives of refugees, also to ensure more comfort and safety. In addition to meeting the functional need, it was also surprising to see what a beneficial effect they had on the morale of everyone at the camp. Part of the reason why I think it was such a success was because it allowed these people to escape through their current situation through something so light as fashion, kind of uplifting them, giving them something to be excited about. It was also interesting to see how this kind of frivolous or lightness of fashion can be used as a positive, not a negative. Overall, this entire experience enlightened me as to how universally uplifting fashion can be when it's used for good. Which brings me to my final point. Clothing can save lives in other ways, not just with transformable or functional jackets. One key thing that I do think about clothing is that it's something that we interact with every day. Like, let's just have everyone take a second and look around right now and see if there's anyone here who's not wearing any clothes. Like, no, didn't think so. Fashion and clothing are truly built into our society. You know, it may be able to help with daily issues within a crisis or even save lives in really dire circumstances, but it's not capable of creating immigration reform or redirecting money towards affordable housing. Only the people can do that. Only you guys can do that. So what needs to happen is we need to successfully hack the fashion system and use it as a vehicle for promoting change. And then having that be a way to play a larger role in global issues as a whole, but also backing that up again with impact. So we see fashion, ADIFF sees fashion as a movement, as an opportunity to get people to pay attention to what's really important through a medium that has not yet been oversaturated with messaging. By opening up our brand and our products to customers, we're hoping to create awareness about this crisis through the medium of fashion, because you're much less likely to forget about the needs of a refugee if you have a jacket hanging in your closet that is a constant reminder of their daily struggles. And when you're wearing it, you are wearing that story. And our customers have been telling everyone, I guess, they encounter with their jackets, you know, this is a jacket that, one, was also donated to a refugee. These are the issues refugees face. So kind of using fashion as a way to, one, create awareness, and then two, actually donate product. Because I do feel that awareness and understanding are our greatest weapons for change. You know, you can shut off the news, turn off your radio, or close your eyes as you walk past newsstands, but you really can't avoid clothing. And what you wear does send a message. So really think about what you want that message to say. Do you want your clothes to be produced responsibly, ethically, sustainably? Are they going to bring people together or create further division? Do they have a story? What does that say? So we really need to integrate fashion with what's actually going on in the world. And again, back that up. It's not enough just to wear a shirt that says feminist. You actually have to act on that as well. It's not enough just to wear a shirt that says refugee. You have to act on that as well. And it starts here. I think it starts with you guys. And we need to hold the industry accountable with what we wear, why we wear it, and what we really hope for it to accomplish. Because the way I see it is that clothing is a tool, and fashion is what we make of it. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Angela. Last but not least, Halima Aden is a 20-year-old model, so the same age as a lot of our students, who first came to notice when she wore a hijab and burkini as a contestant in her Miss USA state pageant in Minnesota. She subsequently signed with IMG Models and walked in New York and Milan fashion weeks for designers such as Kanye West, Alberto Ferretti, and Max Mara, and has graced recent magazine covers, including Allure, Glamour, Vogue Arabia, and Grazia. Halima.
Hi guys! How's everyone doing? Good, okay. Oh, cute, cute, cute. I actually don't have that many childhood pictures, so every time I see one, it's a little shocking. I'm Halima Aden. I'm Somali American, and I'm also a refugee. And quick thank you to all of you ladies. As a former refugee, what you guys are doing is important. And thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. So a little bit about the picture on this side. It's actually taken in Kenya. So not the refugee camp, it's not like that, but it happened in Nairobi. And yeah, so I just want to tell you guys a little bit about the camp. My family fled the Civil War in 1994, and we arrived in Kenya, and I was born in Kakuma, which is a refugee camp in northern Kenya. I just remember having like the food rations, and every few weeks we'd get like corn, a bag of oil, and flour, and that was to sustain us for an entire week. Not good. There was a limited medical care. I had malaria year after year, and education was limited. In our little nursery, we learned like the same 5 letters, A, B, C, D. Never got to E because the kids would change, and there'd be like this new group of refugees every single week, and people would move and people would move in. So it was really hard for like the teacher to teach us farther, you know, like, and because our camp was located in the Turkana district, it was really hard because there's conflict. And a lot of times it kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that's happening in America, because there's people who are like, well, you're in our territory and we don't think you belong. And that was the case in the camp. We were in Turkana district and the locals sometimes didn't want us there. And yeah, they weren't always nice. The refugee camp, however, did teach me a lot of incredible things. Like when we are stripped of everything, we learn to appreciate each other, and we learn that communication and people matter. And we also see that we are all alike. You know, we have more things in common than different. The kids. So back in the camp, we got along, and it was refugees from Somalia, Kenya, Sudan, like all over Africa, just parents who wanted better lives for their kids. And I remember we got along, we shared the same cultures, and we even believed in like each other's gods. And when it was Christmas, best believe this girl was practicing, and when it was Eid, they would do the same. So we had that beautiful multicultural environment that we created. And that, however, was a little bit different than when we came here. So when I was 7, we came to St. Louis, Missouri, after years of vetting, and just, it was a long process to get us to come to this country. It's not easy. People are always like, why are they coming here? But it takes a really long time to even have that opportunity to come. And we're fortunate enough to come to the United States. So the first obstacle was learning the new language. I went from being bilingual, speaking Somali and Swahili fluently, because that was our common language there, to being the dumb kid in class that couldn't speak English, and kids wouldn't want to like talk to me or include me. I was a bit of an outcast in first grade. And that was something that was much of a contrast, because in the camp, we all played together. The kids we got along. Like, age didn't matter, race didn't matter, and religion most certainly didn't matter. And coming here, I noticed that there is the boys and then the girls, and even within those two groups, there were little cliques. So that was very different for me and a bit odd. But things got better because we moved to St. Cloud, Minnesota. Oh. Okay, yeah, so things got better because we moved to St. Cloud, Minnesota, and our school actually had an ESL program, so English as second language or something like that. And that was good because I caught up with the other students and it made life much easier. And then middle school came, and middle school wasn't easy at all. I think that's the awkward stage where people like pick on each other, and I just remember going through a really difficult time where girls were asking me if I have hair and what my hair looked like, or weird things. People were just assuming things because they couldn't see my hair. So it was, "Are you an alien?" I'm like, "Do you think?" So it was just weird, but thank God for high school. And I think a lot of that had to do with I made this choice to really not allow the hijab get in the way. I decided to give people the chance to get to know me and not just assume people wouldn't want to be friends with me because I was Muslim. And yeah, that was my first ever photo shoot. I've never actually even taken a professional photo shoot before that, and that was thanks to the Miss Minnesota USA. I had done the pageant, and that made headlines because, again, people weren't used to someone dressed like me competing in a pageant. In fact, it's never been done before, so it caught a lot of attention, and I'm really grateful because I never really had role models to look up to who dressed like me, and I most certainly didn't have the opportunity to flip through a magazine and see women dressed like me. So to give that chance to other girls just meant the world to me. And today we're talking about fashion activism, and I think just me being present on the catwalk, it sends a really powerful message. Just like having the slogans and, like the words on a t-shirt, just being present, wearing my hijab, it sends a really strong message that we are Americans, we belong here, and we are also consumers of the fashion industry, and we should be represented on the catwalk. And yeah, so and that was the Yeezy season 5. I never thought I'd be able to walk for Kanye West or, like Max Mara. That's just not something you would expect from someone who, looks like me. So it's just been really incredible to be a part of that. Thank you.
We're all going to come up here, switch gears for a minute.
Oh, there's stairs. I didn't know that. I was just hopping up.
And we're going to have a little chat and kind of talk through some of these issues. So I'm really excited because we really covered an interesting range of perspectives and topics. And I want to kind of get into the piece. Sarah started talking about how there are these contradictions in the fashion world, and a lot of other people touched on that as well, and even contradictions in your lived experience of being someone who is a regular person wearing a hijab to being a model who wears a hijab. So I'm wondering if you could all kind of talk a little bit more about how we can kind of walk those lines and resolve some of those contradictions and speak to that issue of meaning and impact. So, clearly we talked about how fashion is something that is superficial and has that side of it, but how can we, kind of get, the consumers and everyday people to follow this lead and sort of think through the meaning and impact piece?
I guess I'll start. So yeah, I feel like this is a kind of shift that it relies on the consumers in order to have this entirely happen. Like, we need to hold the fashion industry and the brands accountable in terms of, responsibility, in terms of impact. It's not enough just to kind of wear your shirt and pretend to kind of be an activist for something. You really need to back that up and to really respond to the fashion industry in that way, and not buy from brands that are not acting through on their word, or are only LGBTQ for Pride Month. You need to start supporting the brands that are have a mission at their heart and are acting on that every single day of the year. So I feel like this shift, it's starting with new consumer brands like Slow Factory, ADIFF, everything that's kind of happening in the world. There are new fashion companies that are coming up, and I think it comes more to supporting these new companies that have this mission inherently tied with them, and buying from us. No, but really, really staying true to your morals, and not buying a $5 T-shirt from H&M just because you can. It really falls on the customers to push this movement forward and to hold the industry accountable.
I'll just follow up. I completely agree. I also think that there's a range of different practices and different ways in which we can translate the politics that we wear on our bodies into politics of practice. So one is actually being creative and artistic enough to create scarves that use NASA images about the banned countries with the word banned on it, which is just an incredible piece of fashion, and it's beautiful. Or to create something like the tent jacket. I don't know if you call it the tent jacket.
I call it the tent jacket.
Okay, the tent jacket. That is already a step in that is an incredible step to be to say this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to pose in front of a camera because this is the definition of beauty, right? So all those, I think, are really, really, really important. I also think that sometimes we don't all have access to that. I mean, I'm so impressed with the creativity. I could never think of a tent jacket, or create a scarf like that. So I can wear a shirt that says, this is what a feminist looks like, or we should all be feminists. The key is to not let it sit there and stop there. The key is, so there is fast fashion, and there are, companies and industries that are not ethically accountable in the way that you've all explained it. To look into that, to do your homework, to recognize the history of the people who you wear, but also to then take it to the next step and wear that shirt and go and protest at a plan, for funding for Planned Parenthood, or for whatever other issue is important to you if you're wearing a shirt that says that we should all be feminists. Don't let it stop there. And that's what I think is really important. To wear a shirt that lists, Black women who have been shot and killed and brutalized by police, and also then go to BLM protests. I'm saying this because I know she does this. So, but that to take that step and to take it and to put it into practice and to recognize collectivity and not just think about it in terms of individualism.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna jump in. Talking about contradiction, to me, it's looking at the Dior shirt, we should all be feminist. I was very curious when this shirt came out, and I hunted down and I wanted to know who made that shirt, okay? Where does the cotton come from? And I saw on the website it was written, from imported fabrics, imported. And I was like, okay, that's like AKA, God knows where it's made, and also lack of transparency is not feminism, because not knowing where this t-shirt is made or who picked that cotton, not necessarily the names of the people who did it, but making sure that it came from a fair trade union, of cotton, or at least grown in a place where, I mean, I don't know, or at least made out of organic cotton if you really want to push it, or recycled cotton. I don't know. I felt like this t-shirt could be so much better, and I was so sad that it was not. It was just business as usual, stick a good slogan on it, and sell it for $700. And to me, I thought, this is wrong. This is what's wrong about fashion activism. In fact, I was very worried about that term. I coined it a few years ago, 5 years ago, and I made up like a Wikipedia page because I wanted to document about what does it mean, because I was seeing a lot of things that were just capitalizing on the movement and really trapping it into a non-action. Like the status quo was still there in the way that it was manufactured, and probably the way that that person wore it. You know, she did an Instagram post, and that was probably the end of her activism. And to me, that was problematic as well, because people are not looking into the origin of the things that they are purchasing. And I know more and more now people are, and so that's good.
I agree with you too. I think it's important to not just be a red carpet feminist and not just do it for like a day, but really, you know, like think about it. And it should be year round. It shouldn't just be a one-day thing or one show thing. And also, does this like employ other women? I love seeing like brands that it's not just a fashion show, but they also go overseas and they make sure women are employed, and it goes far beyond a one show.
I'm gonna, because we started a little late, I wanna make sure people in the audience get questions answered, and then I'll jump in. So if back there, we've got one.
Lots of questions.
Oh, I like it.
Is it on? Hello? Hi. I have a question for Halima. So being that, you know, you're a model now, and you have a mentor like, you know, Corinne Rothfield, who's really kind of been really impactful in the industry. What have you learned from her and, you know, her team around her?
Oh my gosh, she's like my fairy godmother in fashion. That shoot for CR Fashion Book was my first ever like professional photo shoot, and it happened right after the pageant. I think Eveline, who works for her, like saw the news, and you know, she had like talked to Corinne about it, and you know, she took a chance on me, and I think that's what's important. Like people in the industry should take chances, you know, and she helped launch my career after that, so I'm forever like grateful.
Hi, this question is for whoever wants to answer it. I really like your discussion of how fashion presents a contradiction, and how if we're going to really be what we say we are when we wear these t-shirts and everything like that, then we have to fully support the brands that are actually doing these things year in and year out. But how do we combat the issue that a lot of the brands who are the good guys of the fashion industry are also the expensive, you know? Fashion and style are not, you know, readily available to every person. And sometimes for the average buyer, it is more convenient to go to H&M and buy the t-shirt that says feminism, because they can't afford those who are doing, you know, working with sustainable anything. They can't afford it. And so how do we combat that issue?
May I jump in? Yeah. Okay, that's my favorite topic. Great question, thank you. Every time we talk about sustainable fashion, I have that question in the audience. It's a very important question. It's an important question because we are trained to look at the items that we're buying, and we're trained to look at them as, let's wait for the discount, let's wait for something that's less expensive. If you're buying something that's expensive, you feel tricked, you feel duped, you feel like something is not right, like you've been taken advantage of. There's all of these feelings in culture when we buy something. Another way to look at it is, what's the cost per wear? Like you bought something at H&M, how many times did you wear it before you discarded this item? Think of it this way: when you're wanting to purchase something that is going to support someone who is putting all of their funds into a sustainable company and whatnot. Think of it this way: how many times will you be wearing this particular item that you're buying? Maybe a t-shirt, it's easier. You're gonna buy it, at H&M, and then that's it. But if you think of it, for shoes, for example, or coats, there are some timeless pieces that the more you build your wardrobe, the more you wanna invest in, because you know that this particular thing, I'm gonna wear it more than once. I'm actually gonna wear it for years. And you start buying way less. You buy a few things per year that you will be wearing. They become kind of your stapled items, and you know that these are investments in a way or another, and they have value. Let's say you want to let go of them. You're not going to throw them in a plastic bag and discard them. You're going to take them to a secondhand store, and maybe there you're going to see something else that you like, and you're going to purchase that in exchange. And so the items that you buy have value, and they could be put back in a circular economy where instead of trashing them out, then you are going to exchange them. There are other ways also to be sustainable. Buying vintage, renting clothes, there's Rent the Runway, there's a lot of renting clothes services. When you do invest, and let's say you're bored of it, let's say you invested in something crazy, you're like, I'm gonna wear it forever, and you don't. Then there are solutions, there are ways that you can, for example, The Real, or Material Girl, or a lot of other services online where you take a picture of it and then it goes back into being a purchasable item because it's good quality and it's still very well maintained and so on. And so the idea of buying something needs to be treated in a new way, I believe, in a way that instead of feeling tricked and taken advantage of, think about who had to be taken advantage of for this price to be this low. So it is a transaction that we are continuing to contribute to because we think that we are being taken advantage of or we don't have. But in fact, if we don't buy for let's say for a few weeks, and then we wait for the sale of this one item that we want, I bet you would be able to purchase it. The average amount that people spend per month on fast fashion, it's unbelievable. It is a lot. It is a lot. Like I am shocked when I see it. And it comes from families that don't necessarily can afford that much clothes, but they buy because they're used to it. It's gratifying. It's a quick feel good, and then it's not feel good anymore. And it's kind of like, it didn't even last 3 washes, and you let it go.
I'll follow up with that. I completely agree, but this is a slightly different angle on that too. I think you're 100% right that one of the things that we need to do is actually be aware of the conditions of production of our clothing. And the picture that I showed of Obama wearing, holding up the "this is what a feminist looks like" T-shirt, it then became clear that the people the women who were making those T-shirts were making them in sort of sweatshop-like conditions. And so those kinds of contradictions I think we need to explore as well. But the other thing about fast fashion or buying stuff at H&M, and it's true, I think that we need to think, more in a more considered way about what we wear. But imagine if you go into a class at USC and let's say 75% of the students are wearing a shirt that affirms feminism in some way. That affirms some kind of political project in some way, and that is like every day. It can create a norm of certain kinds of politics and messages that I think is really, really important. I think it's crucial for us to, think about the way in which if I'm talking about popular feminism, part of the popularity is accessibility. And people, so that you see it and people have access to it, that we can access the ideas. The key, again, though, is to not take accessibility as the end, sort of the end root of politics, right? That not take accessibility or just that visibility as an end in itself. But think about where the next step has to be saving for something that is a different kind of fashion purchase, or taking that T-shirt that says feminist and then, doing something, political, like a protest or a donation or a volunteer or that kind of thing. So it's, again, making that connection, I think. But and that's why I love those, being in the Women's March and having all those signs and those hats. It was incredibly powerful. And then I was really, really sad that after this incredible display of female power, that, like barely a month later, we had, women being shut down in Senate hearings and silenced and interrupted and, diminished in all this way. So that's what we need to figure out, is how to make that next step.
I just want to have Halima follow up too on the visibility piece, because you're a walking piece of visibility in terms of wearing the hijab in these fashion shows, but we see in this one picture of you, you're the only one. You're in front of the line, but you are the only one. So can you talk about, how you can't control who hires you, right? And you're sort of riding a wave right now, but how can you maintain the importance of this visibility?
I think I can say that I'm successful when there's more than just one hijab wearing model. When I can look and I can see another girl wearing a hijab on the same runway as me. That is like how I would really say I've succeeded in what my messaging has been, and that there's room for more than just one. But I also want to show other girls you can, because even within like my culture, my faith, there's people who think of it as a contradiction, and it has nothing to do with the fashion industry. It has everything to do with us. And with that, I think it's amazing, because if you look at the consumers, it's not shocking to see that same outfit being rocked in Dubai or other Muslim countries. It's very normal, so it's about time that we saw that on the runway as well.
Francois? Oh.
Thanks for the great presentations. This is a question for Angela and Celine. I'm wondering if you could tell us to what extent the refugees you work with are involved in the design of your products, maybe in the production, and what that process is like.
Yeah, so I'll open this up right now. My answer to that question right now is not enough for ADIFF. We have much larger goals in terms of empowerment and employment of refugees through our brand and with our production process and with our design process. Currently, to date, it's more of the testing that we're doing side by side with refugees, and it's not enough. I got my co-founder here. I'm like we gotta go to Jordan and test this winter. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to having the resources and having the money, which is unfortunately the reality of most startups and businesses. But what we see for our 5-year goal is creating ethical employment facilities in the U.S. that can work with resettled refugees and former homeless in order to empower them to kind of take control of their lives in this new environment and give them a safe place to work that is going to be ethical, be sustainable, and be helping them create a new life. Because while these jackets may be able to help in daily issues, they're not capable of building lives for these people in their new environment. So yeah, that is our long-term goal, and that's how I see the future of this going, being less of donation-based system, more of long-term solutions in terms of resettlement and empowerment. But yeah, I know, right, not enough right now, but we're working on it.
For us, it's more not on a product, but it's more around the education programs and workshops that we run there. That is very collaborative and very educational for me, at least, because I learn a lot from what they need, what they're looking for. When we play and we take photo shoots, we're both like playing. There is a project that we're working on for 2018 where we are going back to the refugee camps if there is no war in Lebanon, with a media partner, an American media partner that's a fashion media partner that wants to go document what's going on there, but also create a photo shoot that's completely styled and make-up and created and modeled by the girls that we work with in the refugee camp. So that would be like a product in a way, because it will create photography. But as our product themselves, there are some ideas. There's a sewing facility in the refugee camp where they're like, we can do anything. And so there's the idea, but I haven't had the chance yet to attack it and be like, okay, we're doing this. And one of it, I mean, I guess we were talking offline before, and one of the idea is I would have to go move to Lebanon to make this happen in a sustainable way. There's a lot of this idea that's brewing. I'm not ready yet to let go of my life in the US to go move back to Lebanon, but maybe in the future.
We have to work together for that, I think.
I think it's also interesting, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit in terms of public-private partnerships, because, you know, and Angela, you talked about hacking the fashion system, which I assume you meant more the larger fashion industrial system. And both of you have kind of worked in more alternative ways in terms of partnering with other NGOs or having a donation-based kind of model. So do you see that as sort of the same model moving forward, or do you think you can really hack the larger fashion industry? Could you get, you know, Karl Lagerfeld or, you know, whoever on board in some of your schemes?
I would say that's the dream.
Yeah.
Is, you know, not having this just be something that we're doing, but having this become a movement that, you know, echoes all the way through couture designers. And, you know, it has to start somewhere. But yeah, ultimately my goal is like, I don't want to be the only one who's doing intentional design for, you know, for global crisis. I want this to be something that every company has, or some sort like corporate social responsibility that is echoed throughout the entire fashion industry. So yeah, I mean, it's got to start somewhere, but I absolutely see that as the larger goal for what we're trying to do and this entire movement as a whole.
Yeah. Roz, you want to?
Yeah, so I was actually gonna ask about cultural appropriation, but then you reminded me of this private-public partnership thing, and kind of, I'm from the UK where we're like kind of fully socialist, and that's like kind of the state like takes care of everyone. So in terms of like the limits of capitalism and the limits of like private, you know, public partnerships, and do you guys kind of believe in, outside of just fashion, but in a very much electoral and on the ground sense, kind of making a shift with the whole system, not just kind of the fashion world, but like literally, does this country, which is hyper-capitalist, need to change from the top down? And maybe then we can kind of start looking at things like fashion, start looking at things, you know, kind of on a more granular level. It's very abstract, but.
I'm like, what's the question? I mean, I come from Montreal, Canada, so definitely have seen like the state taking care of people and having it a system that works. But what do you mean by socialism? Like all the way till like really socialism? I really think that charity-based movements are problematic in a lot of ways, and I know I am in that business entre guillemets, in quote unquote, but it's problematic because it's very post-colonial, and it's very much like white savior is going to save your life and is going to go to the country and save you, and that's basically what charity is. And I've always been very careful working with NGOs because of that, especially. I partner with only NGOs that have a very solid program where they go and they roll up their sleeves and they work with locals and they empower locals, because with the charity model and that kind of model of helping others, it's very problematic if it's not designed in a way that is respectful for other cultures and really checks you in before you go in and help others.
That's a very big question. I think I agree with you completely. I think that in a context such as the United States at this particular historical moment, that it's not looking like there is going to be a widespread political economic change to socialism. So what do we do with that? And that's the question, is to not let that be paralysis, right? Not let that be a reason to not think about how politics can change, how the economy can change, and so on and so forth. I think it's been a very rough year for many of us in the United States in terms of politics and in terms of things like gender and race and capitalism and how these things intersect and create a particular dynamic of power. I think that we need to pay attention to what's happening right now in the United States with story after story after story of abuse and abuse of power and how people are challenging power and whether or not this is a moment of a tipping point or not. We have to be vigilant, right? And we have to, allow certain kinds of politics to not be normalized and continue to hear the stories and to think about what to do with the stories and move politics in that direction. Because I'm with you in the kind of critique of what the sort of ravages of capitalism, but it's also, I've been working in this exact area and for so long, and there have been changes, but it's not a linear sort of change, and so you have to think about how it is that you want to position yourself as an actor in this field and what you want to do about it. To think about different ways that you can challenge particular norms and assumptions of capitalism or not, right? So that's sort of, where I would say, in terms of the socialism question. Regardless of whether or not you believe in socialism or not, what do you do if that's not a possibility, right? What do you do then, I think?
Yeah, I want to echo that point as well. And that's sort of what I felt when I started this project originally was, the government isn't really doing enough about this issue. So what potential is there for me to kind of add my voice to this and add an impact to this? So I feel that when the government is not acting, when the nonprofits aren't doing enough, it does fall on, the capitalists, the consumer brands to kind of step up and do something. And, there are some consumer brands that are doing that now. Hamdi from Chobani, that's a great example of a for-profit company that has a substantial impact. And I think that's kind of where it falls when the government's not being responsive, nonprofits don't have enough money. It comes to consumer products and consumer brands to really push things forward and be able to further the world and further our growth. So, I would say when it doesn't fall on the government or when the government's not acting on it, it comes down to consumerism and to you personally of what you can do.
Oh, yeah, and then we'll get Noah.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm a second-year student in social work, and my work is really much in CSR in the entertainment industry in particular, because I'm an artist, and I think that queer people of color, we've been always sort of at the forefront of fashion, so we use fashion to self-actualize and self-realize our truth. My question is, as social workers, we're very much systemic thinkers, and a lot of the time we have a lot of struggle redefining our profession. A lot of people assume that our job is only rehabilitating people into the system, but in reality, we're systemic thinkers. My question is, it's kind of like 3 different questions and you can tackle all of them in whatever way. So right now, working with a construction management company to try to find ways in which we can track labor trafficking within that industry. It's been very hard to identify where along the supply chain are the gaps happening. So within the fashion industry, when it comes to labor trafficking, where do you think along the supply chain do you find those gaps? It's one of those questions. The other question is, we talked about transparency, and transparency is so important. It's one of the things that lacks within construction management. Now, with transparency also comes accountability. So what are your systems of accountability that you hold either clients or consumers accountable and yourself accountable as well? So what is your practice of accountability? And then lastly is, what are your strategies for buy-in?
Those are such good questions. Okay, I guess I will start. I'll start with the human trafficking one. That is an amazing question. I feel like the answer to that within the fashion industry is working with a supplier that you can trust and that you visited, or you have boots on the ground that can hold them accountable every day. Being a startup, it's hard for us to pay for flights to China every day, but working with a company that has an office like next to the factory that's always going to be there and has the ability to communicate very openly about what's going on in terms of practices of labor. It's really finding or working with the suppliers that you can trust, working with the sourcing teams that you can trust, and yeah, just doing like random checkups as well, I think too, unplanned things that you can kind of go and triple check to make sure everything's okay. On the second front, wait, what was that one? That was, what was the second? Accountability. Yeah, you know, with what we're doing, it's so hard to kind of tell factories how we want things to go because we're more of like a burden to them because we're doing such small order quantities. You know, we're up against factories doing 50,000 units when we're doing 1,000 units. So it's hard for us to be like, you guys have to have these many fire extinguishers, these many bathrooms, this many time, like this much time off. So the way that we've kind of like gotten around that is by going to the factories that the larger companies that do have such accountability and responsibility, going to the same factories that they use and kind of like tagging along on their practices because that factory has to uphold these conditions because, you know, Nike is holding them accountable. So like, let's just kind of like slide into their production run and, you know, tag off of those responsibilities and that accountability. So being a startup, it's definitely harder to get the factories to listen to you. But yeah, that's kind of the way that we found to get around it.
I just want to say two things. Research and there's a website called sourcemap.com and do you know it? You know? I know the founder. And SourceMap maps all of the manufacturing across the world, and their goal is to make it super transparent. About accountability and transparency, I think it's both on the companies and on the individuals. I think when we talk about being an activist, if you are running a company, you can run your company as an activist, like I do, and you can also live it in the same way. And what does it mean? It means literally knowing, researching, being curious, being, you know, curious enough to like really go into what is the status quo and how can we make it a little better and can I affect change by doing just a few things that are different. So acting and feeling like you can act every time that you have a boundary in front of you that is either bigger than you can imagine, like the government is not, you know, helping us. And I come from a part of the world where the government really does not help us. It's actually like warlords like running the country. So when I came here and that the administration changed, I was like, oh, welcome to the Middle East, you know. So don't count too much on your government, but like you can do a lot more as an educated, well-researched individual, the same way that you would do with your company, like researching really well where you would manufacture and then acting every time that there's something that you need to adapt on.
Yeah. Here.
Hi, my name is Aditi, and I'm a sustainable fashion blogger and photographer, and I really try to forefront intersectional feminism in all the work I do, so I really appreciate the conversation you've created today. So my question is, the sustainable fashion industry as it currently stands is more of a niche or a response. And we've kind of touched on the limits that come with it being a luxury market in terms of access and privilege. So my question is, from the policy perspective, how can we change the fashion industry with the more focus on fast fashion? Because I think the approach that often needs to take place is starving the beast, which is fast fashion, while building people's power with sustainable fashion. So how do we starve the beast from policy perspective? What can we as consumers do?
I mean, I feel like looking at data recently, in the past 4 years, consumers have been changing their behavior very slowly but effectively. We're looking at a big drop in sales for big conglomerates like Gap, for example. Century 21 is doing great, unfortunately, but H&M as well. People are becoming more and more aware and more picky into what they're buying, when they're buying. And since the past elections, like the past year, sales have dropped in terms of like going and just purchasing a ton of stuff. I think people are slowly changing into their, like, culture is slowly changing, very, very slowly. But we are seeing change. Around the holidays, I think the data was 74% of Americans are supporting sustainable and fair trade companies across industries during the holiday season, which is a beautiful percentage, 74. And and the millennials, 80% of millennials are concerned into supporting a company that that their values meet their values, like that share the same values. And I really think that we are moving slowly towards like a massive change into starving the beast, but it's not gonna happen tomorrow. But if we continue in like this change of culture, it could be like, you say to yourself, like, for this month, I'm not gonna buy anything new for me. Instead, I'm gonna fix what I have and mend what I've broken. Or maybe you have some shoes you can take to the cobbler, like really train yourself into old school methods where, I know it sounds like a grandma talking, but seriously, like I do that every year, like just taking the shoes and having them fixed. Or what if instead you did a swap party and you guys swapped clothes? Or there are so many creative things we can do that doesn't need to have you waste all of your money into a designer outfit or something like that.
I think that's a great question. I think that you mentioned the kind of intersection and like the benefit of having an intersectional conversation about this kind of thing. I think that sustainability and sustainable fashion and fair trade, like you said, that you can see the actual data in the United States where more people are paying attention to these kinds of issues, and also like, you know, sales dropping in other areas. I think that this sustainable fashion is one of the places where we really feel like we can do something, that we can actually, you know, sometimes it feels really hopeless, you know, especially if you're ever on Twitter, you know, then it always feels hopeless. You know, social media and this and the media circulation in general right now, sometimes it feels really hopeless. And I don't think people want to feel hopeless. I think they want to feel like they can do something. And sustainable fashion and fair trade is one of the kind of most accessible ways that we can actually, you know, kind of, you know, exercise that kind of change. So I do think that the more we see it, the more we have sustainable fashion bloggers. The fact that we have a category called sustainable fashion blogger, right? That we didn't have, you know, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So you know, that sort of moving into, this gets to the question about capitalism too. Like if you can create industries are going to be created and new markets created all the time in capitalism, right? That is something that lots of people just like throw their hands up and it's like, these are just yet another market for this, yet another market for this. If new markets for profit, for capitalist profit can be created, new markets for sustainable fashion can also be created. New markets for a sustainable product can be created. New markets for, you know, anti-racist policy can be created. And so it's there we should kind of turn our attention to and support, you know, sustainable fashion bloggers.
I want to be mindful of time because it's 7:45. We have a reception following this event, just in 106, which is back there. So I invite you all to come to the reception, and if you have other questions to ask our panelists, I want to thank all of our panelists for coming and offering their time and perspectives. And again, thank you for coming to this series, and thanks to Tech Ops and Public Affairs and all of Annenberg, I guess, and the whole world for helping. So please join us. Thanks.